Hi, Magic in the Room listeners. Before we start our episode, I want to let you know about our upcoming Coaching Skills for Leaders certification. This certification teaches key coaching skills and is helpful for anybody who wants to have formal or informal coaching conversations. It's super practical and is actually how I got my start coaching, so I can personally recommend it. The course is taught in a live virtual format, so you can join no matter where you live. Magic in the Room listeners can get $100 off your registration if you use the promo code MAGIC100. Check out the show notes for all the details.
Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. I'm Luke Freeman.
And I'm Hannah Braderud. And today we are sitting down in my hometown of Big Sky, Montana with Brad Niva. Brad is the CEO of the Big Sky Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the podcast, Brad.
Thank you.
All right. So thanks for spending some time with us today. Luke and I have been getting to know you a little bit over the past few months. And there's a lot of exciting things that are happening here in Big Sky. And as a leader of the chamber, I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of what's your current role look like? What are some things that you get involved in? And then we'll dive into some background.
Gotcha. Big Sky is an interesting little place in the fact that we're just around 6,500 feet. We're up in the Rocky Mountains. We're a destination. That's what we're probably mostly known for. There's only about 3,000 people that live here. But on a given night in the middle of the ski season, we'll have 15,000 people in town. So I think a lot of people consider what a chamber is, or they have an idea of what a chamber is. And I certainly did. I've never worked in the chamber world before coming here to take on this new role. But in a small town here where we're known as a census designated place, a CDP, is that we don't have any sort of form of government here at all. We're within the county and we have no city laws, city government, anything like that. And so what we have is this very unique community where we have a handful of nonprofits here that are actually making things happen in this town. And so we have 7 taxing districts, and each of those 7 districts is in charge of something. We have a water and sewer, we have a public safety, we have fire, we have soon to be a library district, we have a parks district, we have a tax district that's based on a 4% lodging tax. So it's an interesting place. And then those funds are collected and then dispersed to these nonprofits that actually make the town work. And what I was naturally led to, or what really appealed to me here, is the opportunity that I've worked in city government, county government in the past, and knowing that there's just this huge apathy for the general public to are not engaged. Like that's what the city does, or that's what the county does, and there's a city manager. That's not here. So what happens here is we have huge community engagement. And I think instead of and I'll tell you a little more about my background in a minute, but I was recruited here, and I remember the recruiter telling me kind of like what it was. And when she told me there was no form of government, I'm like, what is wrong with this place? Like thinking that.
And how do you get anything done?
Right. And I was thinking there was a banjo playing in the background and people are like, hey, but now that I've been here a year and a half, I think it's one of the best things that happens here is that, yes, we don't have government. We see there's some failures in that, but we, at the same time, look at what we get done and what we dive into. And this overwhelming, I guess I call it contagious optimism, where people in my role, where a lot of our job is problem solving, is that every day I get out of bed not going, oh God, how are we going to do that? It's like, all right, what are we going to get? What are we going to attack? Let's jump in and do it. And it's really fun. I feel really blessed that I'm 53 years old. I figure I got about 10 or 12 more years left in me for career work. And I'm like, what a great place to do this at, that I really get to flex my muscles. I feel like I came here with 30 years of experience so that I could put something on the table and make a difference. And I've never lived and worked in a community like this before. So it's fun to play.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. That really resonates with me, and maybe this connects. It feels like it does in my mind, but I remember when I stepped out of being an employee into being an entrepreneur and a small business owner, I had some really similar realizations. Like, I felt like most of the challenges that I was managing and most of the problems I was working on inside an organization were, how do I manage the stakeholders within this organization to move forward and get things done? And then all of a sudden I woke up one morning and I was like, the ceiling is me. The ceiling now is, how clear can my vision be? How strategic can I be? And how quickly can I learn what I need to know to be able to create value for people, to be able to build this business, whatever it is. And so I hear kind of some echoes of that in your story, without big brother to kind of manage around and work within and have to wait for and whatever. It really is, okay, community, what's the horizon that we're pointed towards and how are we going to get there? Load up the backpack and let's go.
Absolutely. And I call that the entrepreneurial spirit. The buck stops with you, the owner, the founder, the brain trust behind the business. And I was self-employed and owned 3 different companies over the course of 10 to 15 years of my career. And there's situations where, like, oh gosh, like a problem would come up, like, who do I hand this to? And you're like, oh, never mind, it's me. And so you have to take a minute and I remember being scared, almost paralyzed, that I could not move forward, or that it was a huge wall I had to climb. But once I climbed the first one, then the next one came and it wasn't as tall. And the third, and now it's like, come on, bring me a problem and I'll fix it. It's actually empowering. It's I think one of the greatest traits of leadership is that mindset that you can fix this. And at the same time, surround yourself with the right team of people to help you get over that wall.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I learned, and I've learned in leadership, is that there used to be this huge burden on myself that I'm the only one who can solve this problem, or that no one else understands what I'm going through. And there's an opportunity now that, you surround yourself with the right people to make something happen. I've always said in being self-employed and owning companies, I got to surround myself with the people I wanted to be around versus the people when you work in a job in a 9-to-5 that you kind of inherit who's around you. And I found that really empowering when I remember my first week or two of owning my first company and building a staff. And I was like, oh, this is actually kind of a nice thing. I could get that person to do this and that, and that's what makes, building a good team and making sure that you have the right people in the right place to get you where you need to be.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And we can, and it is a shift, right? Being the person who has the answers and solves the problems. And that's often why we get into positions of leadership or start businesses. And it's a different mindset to shift from being the doer, the fixer, the solver, to accomplishing things through other people and through a team of people. One of your mantras that I've certainly heard you talk about is, these are the ideas of being of service and getting shit done. They've kind of been hallmarks of your career. You've alluded to it a little bit already, but how did those ideas become important to you? And just what does it mean to you? And how do you kind of live that out?
Yeah, I've been using those terms. The joke was if I had tattoos, which I don't have any.
Sounds like you need some.
Right. On one forearm, it would say be of service. And on the other forearm, it would say get shit done.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I was in that mindset when I was an employer. I had well over 100 and some people on payroll. I had other things. So the term being of service, I probably was in a mode of serving my staff as well as serving my customers and going through that. But then fortunately enough, or unfortunately, I still today would think I'd still be self-employed, but we had one of those just fantastic scenarios where someone walked in our door and said, "We want to buy your company, and here's a check." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then it happened again about 6-7 months later. Someone else wanted to buy the company, another company. And so I found myself quickly at age 46, just being not unemployed, but just kind of like, what am I going to do now? And it led me into this nonprofit world where I didn't realize, and it wasn't even on my radar, that this was something I wanted to do or needed to do. But I think we in business, one of the things that we look back, and if you're kind of self-aware of what's going through, is that there were people through your lifespan that have taught you and have coached you and have mentored you along the way. And I think now, being in my 50s, I realize I can go back and go, okay, that person did this for me, that person did, and so I naturally have this now that I feel like I have to pay it forward.
Yeah.
That it's my turn now to be that component in someone else's life and in their career path. And so when I go back to the term of being of service, when I took on this role in volunteering, originally volunteering, but then working for nonprofits now, I've been doing that for the last 7 years, is that my focus now is not about profit and margin and growth. It still is to a certain degree, because a nonprofit, you got to keep them running and you got to keep them managed, and you got to run it like a business, in my opinion, because I don't know how to run anything else that way. I just know how to run businesses. But really getting back to the core of what are we doing and who do we serve? And I think that's just so important to stay focused. And I like to use the term, what's your North Star? Like, what is the thing that you're always focused on? And that's so important to keep you on track. In a community like this, and in the work I was doing previously coming here, was that I was just always trying to move us forward. And my career, for the most part, has been focused in tourism for well over half my life. And so the idea of using tourism as an economic driver for a community is something that's in my blood. So how do we perform? How do we serve our businesses? And I think back again to that service concept is now, and keeping in mind the mentoring, that my job now is, and I've very rewarding, is that I get to sit down with businesses and help them through the process. And because I've walked in their shoes and I've made the mistakes, and I've, if anything, I hope I can be a resource for them. So,
well, that's wonderful. You mentioned that North Star. It's a term we use a lot because we talk about purpose all the time. That's kind of at the core of who we are as an organization, and what we help companies get clarity around, right? What is our North Star? What is our purpose? What is the greatest good that we're here to achieve? And so I'd love to hear, do you see, when you sit down with different businesses in our community, how do you feel that people do most businesses have clarity on that? And maybe that's a layup, because I know that the work that we do, a lot of businesses haven't really thought about it, but this is a little bit of a different kind of community. Do you have a sense that it's something that business owners think about, get clear on, or not? And, what implications do you see from that?
Yeah. So previous to coming to Big Sky, I was in Oregon, and I was in the southern part of the state. That's where my businesses were based. But just if you're familiar with Oregon geography, I 25 years I was in Bend, Oregon, which is a ski town, small town. Well, was small town. Now it's not. But and so in my previous roles of being a business owner, but then switching over into a support role in a nonprofit world, those were normal business conversations of profitability, other revenue streams, how to manage your day to day. I was really conscious, or making sure to ask those business owners or those managers to make sure, like, first question is, are you getting paid? Like, I think that's something, as you break down the entrepreneurial mindset of a lot of people is that they put so much effort into the business and keeping the business that they forget to pay themselves or put anything in retirement. And I'm just speaking from experience because I did the exact same thing. Like after 10 years, I'm like, did I put any money in retirement over the last 10 years? I'm like, I didn't. I just always kept putting the money back into the business. Now coming here to Big Sky, it's a different can of worms. And I guess I use the term can of worms affectionately a little bit, but business owners here, you know, there's so many, this is tough because I want to be positive that this is a great place to live and a great place to work. And it is. However, it is not a great place to be a business owner. And what I mean by that is it's a challenging environment to work in.
Yeah.
That it's with the exposure of Big Sky and becoming as popular as it has been, the cost of living has gone up dramatically. And it's putting burdens on a business owner that I've never seen in any other community before. It's pretty much guaranteed if you want to hire somebody, you better provide housing. And that's a huge burden on a business.
Yeah.
And then let alone competitive wages and competitive benefits and all these challenges of being a business owner. Now we know typically, like if you own a restaurant, that pass through of those extra expenses goes to your menu items and this and that, but the margins are just so narrow and so small.
Yeah.
And it's been a challenge in that, you know, and this is happening all over the country. Is the workforce issue, and that where do you find people and keep people? And when you have competitive wages, in general, you know, we know here in Big Sky, we pay anywhere from $7 to $8 an hour more than what Bozeman charges. Yeah. And that's just to stay competitive in the marketplace. But again, it's like, boy, as a business owner, you're always trying to, you know, find margin. You'd like to pay yourself. You'd like to expand your business. And I just see there's some impediments that other businesses in other places just don't have. So it's interesting. It's I don't want to call it a science, but it's just something that continues to boggle my mind and trying to understand what it is.
Yeah. So I kind of want to dig into the housing thing because it's been an ongoing conversation that we are having with lots of clients. We recently had an episode about affordable housing and helping employees with housing or getting in the housing game as a business. And recently had an article published in Indian Gaming Magazine specifically for how do integrated casino tribally owned resorts deal with employee housing. So I'm curious, best practice that you see here, you know, you don't have to name names, but who do you see getting it right? And what are the practices that they're experimenting with? And are there any principles for a business owner that's having challenges with retaining employees that you would say, hey, you know, think about housing and think about it this way?
Great questions. I wished I could just rattle off all the answers, but I think we're all learning how to figure this out. You know, we're a mountain town. We're a ski destination town, a recreation destination. And so I feel like my peers are Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Sun Valley, Park City a little bit, Telluride, Aspen Vale, where you just have limited resources. You have this huge need. You need people to make things happen, but at the same time, you don't have the product or the like housing. You don't have enough housing in a space. So when I look at Big Sky, every mountain town is going through this, and then in my 18 months being here, I've really started to try to figure out. I'm a problem solver. And so if I don't understand the problem, I don't know how to fix it. And so I've spent a fair amount of time really diving deep into the research of why do we have a housing problem in Big Sky. And it was kind of the aha moment happened about 6-7 months ago when some of the data I started collecting. I've joked coming to Big Sky on my very first day, I walked in my office and I'm like, okay, first of all, so my office is also the visitor center and we do tourism work. And my first question was like, okay, where are the public bathrooms in town? And second, what kind of research do we have? And the staff looks at me like, we don't have either. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so
there's some woods. You know, yeah, there's just a little walk up the road.
Beautiful porta potties out in the parking lot. But so, for the last year, I've been focused on we need public bathrooms, and they need to be open year round. They need to be heated. They need, it's just something. If you're a destination and you have people coming to visit you, be it overnight or just a day trip, you just gotta have some basic stuff like bathrooms. So we've been working on that. The second component though was the research, and the research is, to me, and I guess maybe because I'm a little bit of a data geek, is that I feel like the numbers tell you the story. And I found that out in a business ownership role too, is that and it took me years as being self-employed. My first 7 years, I was just floundering. I was just doing here and going there and making horrible decisions and not bankrupting, but getting kind of going down that road because I made a bad choice or a bad decision. Yeah. And also it put a strain on my marriage, and that, my poor wife had to ride this wave with me, but I really learned that data tells you the story of what you need to do. And so until I got a CFO on staff who actually started showing me, did you know you do these 3 different revenue streams and they all lose money? And I'm like, I had no idea. So things like that I've learned. So coming here, feeling that research would start telling us the story of what was happening here. And the first biggest aha, as I mentioned a minute ago, was that we actually did a breakdown of counting all the short-term rental homes and condos and townhomes here in Big Sky. Yeah. And over the course of the last 7 years, when Airbnb started back in 2014, we had about 12 homes that were listed in Airbnb. And then 3 years later, VRBO launched in 2017. And we saw this just, if you break it out over the course of 7 years, you just start seeing this inventory going up and up and up. And now, going into December this year and January, we'll probably have over 1,200 homes in Big Sky, 1,200 homes, be it condos, townhomes, a room, a house. We'll have over 1,200 homes in inventory for people to come and stay at, which is fantastic. That because we don't have enough hotels, that fulfills it. However, where the housing problem has come from is that we've not built 1,200 new homes over the last 7 years. We have taken homes that were existing, that were long-term rentals, that have now been converted to short-term rentals, and we've now pulled out all these homes that were available for our workforce to live in. And that's really been the catalyst of why we have a housing problem. And it's happened, and my theory was solid, but then when I went and talked to Jackson Hole, oh yeah, that's exactly what happened here. Sun Valley is exactly what happened here. I was like, okay, so now we're in the new mode of we got to build housing. Yeah. And so it's a tough nut to crack. I really want to say though, Big Sky is probably a step ahead of everybody. I like to say that and brag about that a little bit, but back to some earlier comments, that we have this can-do attitude, that we can fix things, and that we're optimistic, that we're like, come on, this is something we can figure out. And so be it a phenomenal public-private partnership has started here, in that we have a developer who continues to want to develop and build assets, but they also realize they can build it, but they don't have the staff to manage it and run it. So they have to. Now, if you're building a hotel, you've got to build housing. If you're building this business, you got to build this. It has to happen in tandem. Yeah. Now, if we were a city, maybe once upon a time that would have been put in the ordinance, that there would be coding or planning rules that were in place, that if you're building a 200-room hotel, that you have to build, equal amount of housing or something to that effect, but that didn't happen. And so we are, kind of playing catch up here, but there's some really smart people in this space. And I think Big Sky overall is going to get out in front of this, but it's just taking time.
Just to get into the nuts and bolts for maybe small business owners or entrepreneurs, one thing that we've found in working with a couple companies working through this are that it actually ends up financially working out really well for the folks who are owning employee housing, because you're investing assets into something that appreciates, and then you're also realizing tax benefit, for owning that and having the depreciation you can write off, and maintenance and all of that. And it can be a cash flow neutral or cash flow positive, just in saying, hey, let's cover the mortgage by offering this to employees and employees first. So the model, if you have a down payment in your pocket, the model actually works really well for folks. I mean, that's my take on it. I don't know if you've seen that as well.
It's certain. I agree, but I also, is that yes, from an employer standpoint, that investment, it's not in your normal mindset that like I have to build housing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I totally agree with you that there's some benefit to it. I think where I'm seeing the strain on this model is retention of employees.
Yeah.
So, the terminology that I've been using for years is recruit, recruiting employees. My mindset's really changed now that we have to retain.
Mm-hmm.
And as you watch a good staff person that you've brought on, maybe they were 22 years old, they graduated from college, they kind of decided to do the ski bum life a little bit. That's how I started. And, as they get into their 20s and later 20s into their 30s, there's this just natural progression that, well, I want a dog and I want a wife or a husband, or I want I want my own place. I want a backyard. I want a picket fence.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that's kind of got me scared in the fact that what is our long-term prognosis? Right now we've been building a lot of more dorm style living accommodations, which makes sense. It's a quickest, fastest way to get heads and beds for our workforce,
Right.
getting our workforce housed. But at the same time, we really need to start addressing our middle management in that where do we get key people to come in here and fill these gaps? And,
And we certainly see that. We work with some local businesses here in the area where people in middle management and even in some cases upper management live either in employee housing or have to commute because they don't even have a place. They don't have a home that they own here in Big Sky. And so that's, I've definitely seen that and it has to be addressed from both ends, right? And I've loved seeing some of the new buildings come up with, places where people can have a bedroom, but it's more dorm style. It's multiple people living in the same unit, and that doesn't work for someone over the life of their career.
Definitely. And I think one of the things we're seeing challenged across Montana is there's I'm not sure the right terminology. There's a brain trust, or there's a group of people that Montana needs to bring in more managers and build up the pool of people. Yeah. And so with that in mind, those folks are coming from other places, and I'm one of them. I'm one of 5 new executive directors that were hired in Big Sky just this last year. And myself, I came from Oregon. My home used to be on an acre. I used to have waterfront. And then all of a sudden I end up in Big Sky and I'm in a condo, and I'm like, okay, well, this is different. I haven't done this in a while, but it's something that we need to continue to address. And I'm already seeing it. Big Sky Resort, for example, has a lot of the dormitory. They do a lot of their housing designed on the dormitory model, but they're jumping into a phase of construction now that'll be more management focused, that actually a family could live in that particular place and kids can go to school and things like that. And at the same time, as with much of the West, it's getting to a point of affordability. The idea that an entry home and having, you save your money and you got your 20% down. 20% down in Big Sky means,
that's a lot of money.
$600,000,
that's as much as the house would cost to buy in
other places. So that's something that we need to look at as a group of community leaders. What are the challenges that we're putting for our future? Like if we know that we need more managers and more of these people to fill these roles, we need to continue to build forward. At the same time, I look at there's threats on like our school district. We have this beautiful school here. We have a K through 12. For so many years, families here used to have kids would go to up to 8th grade and then they get on a bus and have an hour drive to Bozeman. And we've solved a lot of problems. We've brought in a very good school. We have a great education system now. But down the road, 10 years from now, 15 years, are we going to be a point where entry to come into Big Sky, a young family can't afford to be here.
Yeah.
So in turn, is that school going to be non-existent? I don't know, but those are just things that I don't want to say keep me up at night, but it's something that I think about of how do we keep a sense of affordability.
Yeah. So on that note, what are other things you get to see a wide range of businesses from kind of a unique perspective of being part of a chamber, helping with economic development and workforce development and all these different perspectives? Is there other things that businesses in general, thinking about whether it's here in Big Sky or kind of elsewhere in the country, that nobody's really thinking about, but they should be?
Boy, that's a tough one to wrap your head around. I guess I fall back on myself of being a business owner and the challenges that we have. I think I would like to see businesses. I guess this is where I'd probably go in this direction. This is Big Sky, but all over the country is I think when a business starts, so often, if you were to go borrow money, the first thing the banker asks you is like, well, can you share your business plan? And you're like, oh, yeah, sure. And it's usually very grandiose. It tends to be kind of far-fetched idea of where you're going to go and what you're going to do and this and that. And I think that is great for your first 2 to 3 years of business. But I think a smart business is looking at the next step. So instead of a business plan, you actually start building something called a growth plan. And I think it's really smart for businesses in general to lay it on paper where you're going to go and what do you want to do. And it's basic goal setting. It's trying to figure out the next horizons of where your business is going. And I think one of the challenges I've had in business is that I've chased the shiny penny a little too many times, and that I see something like, oh, well, we got to do this and we got to do that. And I can tell you all those times that I went off my track, I lost money or I lost something. Once in a while, something hit. And so that's how I started with 3 companies. I originally started one company, then saw a shiny penny opportunity. And in a lot of cases, it was problem solving. I saw a problem and I knew how to fix it. I'm like, I could do this. So we launched into that plan. And then 3 years later, there was another problem I found, and I'm like, oh, I can fix that. And so I started a 3rd company. But I think that progression of keeping your business on the forefront of creative and fresh and looking ahead is really smart, because a thing that really hurts me to watch is watching a business that's lost its direction or it just, my first company was a company I bought from a family that had had it for 34 years. And my question was like, well, why do you do that? I'm like, well, because we've always done that.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, interesting. And maybe it's just me and my personality is that that's not an acceptable answer. I want to know really why do you do that? And so we had some great success because I completely took the product that we had, which was very good, but then really spun it around, like making sure that it was always forward thinking and being creative around that. There are business owners I've run into, and I'm sure you guys have too, that have just plain dumb luck, have walked into a business that's been successful.
Yeah.
So thinking about long-term is making sure that those businesses go through that process. I know you guys work with Andy Dreisbach, and there's another person here in town, Alan at Big Sky Landscaping. And the 3 things the couple of things that we've talked about is we are all recipients and graduates of a program called the 10,000 Small Business Initiative that Goldman Sachs did. Yeah, so I had a great opportunity back in 2013, somewhere in there, where I was the very first class of businesses that got accepted to Goldman Sachs on this idea of putting 10,000 business owners back to a school to teach us business, because so many people are in business, but they don't have a business background, and there's so many challenges with that. And so that's where I was taught this idea of a growth plan, of looking ahead, looking at, and put it on paper. If it's not on paper and you're not looking at it on a monthly basis, then are you losing direction? And it doesn't mean that plan is set in stone. It gives you that opportunity or that mindset. So if you do have a shiny penny that comes along, put it down, figure it out, test it, make sure it's worth the investment of your time and your effort to make sure that it pencils out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So similar question. You mentioned the school here. I know you've done some work with programs in the schools. You know, if you're talking to a group of graduating seniors right now, you know, towards the end of 2022, and someone asks, hey, what are some areas that I should be thinking about? What are some areas of opportunity for my career that I should explore? What are you seeing? What would your advice be?
You know, it's, I tend to be pretty much a free thinker. And so I feel like the opportunity is like whatever you're passionate about and what you go to school in your preparation. Like, I'm going to be an engineer or I'm going to be a doctor. There's pretty good chance that you're going to change your mind somewhere in that process. And I'm just speaking from experience that I went into engineering early on as a freshman. And by my sophomore year, I'm like, engineering is not what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I think, if anything, my suggestion is follow your passion. Like if I've found that my passion is what's driven me for 30 years of my career, is that I am so much more engaged in things that I really care about. And it actually fell back down to academics, and that I got A's in the classes I really enjoyed. And I really just jumped in with both feet versus I got C's on those classes. I'm like, oh, I hate those classes. So that's just carried on, throughout life. I think the other thing that I would say, especially in a small town such as Big Sky, is I think one of the best tools that I've been handed or given is that I got out of my hometown and I got to go see the world and go see other things. I've funny enough, in my career, we've moved 6 times. Well, this is our 6th home we've owned, I guess, is, and each of those homes was in a different town or a different region, mostly always in the Pacific Northwest is where I've always been. But I would come to certain towns, and as you get integrated in a town, you start trying to meet people. One of the challenges my wife and I have had is, in our family, is that we found people that are very entrenched, that their parents live there, they went to school there, that they've grown up there, their kids, they don't have a worldview, I guess is, and I'm not trying to sound snobby or arrogant, but I find more experiences builds your depth and of your personality and your point of view, especially that you can look at different perspectives.
And I think that's true in business in general too. If you've worked at different types of companies and different sizes of companies, even across industries, it broadens that perspective and worldview on business in general too. So
back to your question, if I was a new student, I was just like, go travel, go see the world. Don't feel like, I was just in a meeting yesterday in Great Falls, and it was on economic development, and a couple people from the governor's office were there speaking, and their whole push right now is to get kids to stay in Montana. And I have an issue with that. I mean, I understand what they're trying to do is to keep their workforce in place, but at the same time, when I look at like per student, I'm like, no, go see the world. If you want to come back to Montana for your career or bring a job or bring a
or
company,
even for family, you know,
it'd be great. But at the same time, it to me, it almost inhibits this opportunity to move forward. My parents were fantastic in really giving all of us kids wings to just go do things. I get a little guilt here and there, even after being gone for 30 years. I wish you were closer, but you know, at the same time, you know, I'm grateful that I don't live in the same town I was born and raised in.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, this is maybe a tangent, but hearing that that's a concern of theirs, you know, I just think about, for me living in Oklahoma, I mean, we have days that hit 110 now, but they just did the big 30-year forecast, and they're saying by 2050, there's going to be 1 to 3 days of summer that hit 125 degrees.
Whoa.
And there's going to be plenty of people moving here. I don't think there's a attracting people issue to Montana. I think what we've been talking about, okay, is there a place for them to live? Are there leaders here that are engaging that they will actually stay? Right? Plenty of people want to come and be a ski bum.
Yeah.
Right. It's how do we convert folks? So I don't know. I'm sure you have a lot of ideas about that, but just this idea of the talent is there. Right. There's an abundance of people who want to be in a beautiful, amazing place and get on a wagon that's going somewhere cool. Can we make it where the taste doesn't sour after 6 months or a year or 2 years?
And I've seen both sides of that too, right? In smaller rural communities, which most of Montana is, and that's not just in Montana, there has been ongoing migration to cities because of lack of opportunity and things like that. And that can drain a local economy, local talent pool. There are areas in Montana that are growing fast, like Big Sky and Bozeman, but it's a big state, right? And it is mostly agricultural. But what we are seeing is that there is a lot more opportunity for people who are maybe adventure seeking, that have a can-do attitude, that aren't daunted by challenges, whether it's climate or the lack of government with formal processes to get shit done, to use that term. And so that is part of the uniqueness of this community, is that it draws the type of person who may be more of a risk taker, who's willing to try things, even if they're not certain of the outcome. But yeah, to Luke's point, like, yeah, how do we retain those people so we don't have constant turnover?
Yeah. And what's inhibiting them to come? And,
Yes.
and you circle back to, you guys both said housing, and it's if we can solve that problem, then Montana has a great forecast for growth.
Yeah.
But a lot of the things that are inhibiting is just the cost. Now, I watched the same exact thing happen in Oregon over 20 years of this huge migration out of California, and home prices that were well in the $1 million range, and then come to Oregon and you could buy some for $600,000, and you could put money in the pocket, and you had a bigger home and a nicer view and a bigger backyard than you had in California. And I think that's a little bit of the scenario that's happening here.
Yeah.
Montana is still very much undiscovered. Good and bad, there are people moving here, and there's people moving here with their job in tow. And especially after COVID, we're seeing that businesses can survive on Zoom. And I still kind of cringe the idea of that. It just still, I can't conceptualize. I like working in an office space. I like having staff around me, and that I can pop in an office, or they can pop in mine and go, hey, but at the same time, learning that you can just jump on Teams, or you can, all those kind of things.
Yeah, and companies do struggle with that, how to build and maintain a sense of community, especially if it's a hybrid kind of environment where some people are remote and some aren't.
Yeah, and I think the challenge I've had is just as a manager is setting culture.
Yeah.
Because I hope one of the strengths that I've brought to any company I've brought in is a sense of a culture. And I'm not sure how to build culture on Zoom. It's an interesting kind of phenomenon to play with, and we'll have to just watch and see. Somebody's going to figure it out.
Yeah.
But
There are companies that do a decent job, but I also do know that is a common challenge. It is a struggle because it does take a whole different level of intentionality and different skills, honestly, to, create a sense of connection in an online environment. We've talked about that here on this podcast before as well. So we're as this conversation is starting to wrap up, Brad, this has been really interesting and engaging conversation. What are any kind of final thoughts for a business owner, entrepreneur, a leader within a business, kind of based on your experience being where you are today? What are some things you want to impart?
Yeah. Probably two. One was to give back. You may not think of yourself as a mentor, or that you have something to contribute to someone who's in a different place in their career path.
Yeah.
But I just think where I've learned so much more talking to people who are wiser and smarter and have got more experience than I ever learned from a textbook. So I just encourage businesses and business leaders to give back. And there's multiple opportunities there. And I've been part of there's a number of, programs out there. Opportunity Knocks is the program that I was part of, but get involved with a group of like-minded business owners and have those check-ins. I think that's really key. The other component is to recognize that you will not live forever, and your business, if it means what my previous business has meant to me, that you need to start thinking about a succession plan and an exit strategy. And the funny story for me is I literally had owned my first company for maybe 30 days. And it had taken me well over a year to make the acquisition and to plan it and do all those different things and leave a corporate American job that I had in golden handcuffs and the whole mindset of walking away and going out on my own. And 30 days in, a good friend of mine is like, "So what's your exit strategy?" And I'm like, "What is an exit strategy?" Like
I just executed it.
Well, exactly. But at the same time, that terminology had never been introduced to me. It never came up. And I'm like, oh my God. And so fast forward, I never thought in a million years people would walk in and actually want to buy my companies. And I was very fortunate to be in my 40s and have that opportunity happen. But I think it's really smart. Back in, we were talking about growth plans and making sure that your company and you are growing forward. But at the same time, starting to look at, how do I get out of this business? Is this a business that my kids will take on, or a family member, or is it for my employees? Or am I going to get that windfall where someone walks in and writes a check? Yeah. And so I think that's a really important component of a strong business and knowing where you want to go and what you want to do. Because the worst scenario is get to a point in your career where you're burned out, you're tired, you're in your 70s, and the company has lost all its worth. Because good Lord, you've worked your butt off to get to where you are. So taking that recognition of, I've done a good job, but it's time to step away. And the comparison or the analogy would be an athlete, like a Michael Jordan, who's at the top of their game, and then all of a sudden they're like, "I'm leaving," and you're like, "What?" But they're cashing out at that point in their career where they feel like they have something else to go do. So. Yeah. So those are the two little words of advice.
Great thoughts. Thank you so much for that. Luke, what are your kind of key takeaway or final thoughts?
Yeah. So I really appreciated, Brad, your perspective on creating a housing plan that includes middle managers, senior leadership. We, from a leadership development perspective, we think about a leadership pipeline inside an organization. People who basically lead themselves every day, and then people that lead a team. And then there's an organization gets big enough, you've got a group of folks that most of their job is leading leaders, right? And then you get to organizational leadership. And we design programs around that and help people wrap their heads around it and say, what competencies do we need to build, and what's unique about the leadership journey at our company versus other companies, and how do we encode that in our culture, all that stuff. But I love just applying that idea to housing too, and saying, do I have a plan? Do I have programs in place? And yeah, maybe it's shared housing or units for frontline staff, but then what programs are there for middle management, senior leadership team, things like that? Whether it's a, program that helps purchase a home, right? And then you do a lease back lease with an option to buy, 5 years down the road. I think about, and we've had a few conversations with some clients about this, how do we design bonusing to apply towards housing and equity in company-owned housing versus a cash bonus? So I think there's a lot of creative ideas out there, and I'm not saying that one way is the way, but just this idea of that pipeline of a place that's stable, that makes sense for where people are in their stage of life. I'm going to be chewing on that for a while. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Luke. Yeah. And for me, just this idea that we're kind of in a town that operates like a startup, that, and that, as we think about, okay, there's not formal government, there's not necessarily formal processes. We have to find ways to get things done and overcome some challenges. And operate in a really nimble way. I think that's always a good lesson for companies. And we work with companies both in kind of that are in more of a startup phase and companies that are more established, right? It has its own set of challenges. When there's too much process, too much bureaucracy, too much red tape, it's hard to get a lot of things done. And there needs to be structure, right? So how do you create that middle road where you don't lose that entrepreneurial spirit as you mature and get more established and get more structure in place? And that's something that I keep thinking about, right? So whether it's Big Sky in the future of this town, you know, as people are, there's definitely push to incorporate. We work with companies that are in that phase of kind of growing past that stage. They need more structure. They need more distributed leadership, right? So how do we keep that magic and that special sauce that made it special and made people want to come here and be here in the first place? So those are things that I will continue to chew on and think about.
Yeah, and I know we're trying to wrap up here, but I think this idea of value alignment, you know, Big Sky to me as sort of an outsider that has the amazing, you know, opportunity to be here every month. There's a set of shared values that most people here seem to have around adventure and physical stimulation and natural beauty and entrepreneurial spirit and self-determination, right? And so the fact that there's that shared value I would say enables all of these different nodes of the network to work well together without that umbrella of hierarchical authority and structure and all of that. So I say all of that out loud to say for organizations, people talk about being flat. They talk about having a team of teams. They talk about, you know, there's all sorts of different words to describe it. You know, it's essentially all giving day-to-day decision-making authority, pushing it lower in the organization. I'll say the thing that enables that is shared values, value alignment, a shared purpose. And so if you're a leader and you want people to be able to operate with that entrepreneurial spirit in their job, you know, is it clear that you're all going the same place? Yeah. Is it clear what your North Star is? Is it clear what your shared values are? Only when those things are clarified can you really distribute the leadership down to those nodes and those individual entrepreneurial leaders. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Well
Great.
said.
Yeah. All right, Brad, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate your time and sharing your wisdom with us and other leaders out there.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Brad, where can people find you if they want to connect?
Oh, gosh. Probably the easiest is email at brad@bigskychamber.com. And if you happen to be in Big Sky, my door is always open. The part of my favorite thing is talking to businesses. And unfortunately, I get buried in payroll and other things that are, you know, important too.
Yeah.
I'd rather talk to a business
that doesn't
owner.
sound familiar at all. And for us, you can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com. Hannah and I are both easy to find on LinkedIn, wherever. So reach out. Would love to connect. And thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Province, Hannah Bretterow and Luke Freeman, and produced by Ben West. Theme music is by Evan Grimm. Title track Fake Love, available on Apple Music.
Hey, I want to give a shout out as well to Christie's of Big Sky. They were gracious enough to allow us to use their conference room today to record in, and it's beautiful. And thank you so much. If you're in Big Sky, you should swing by their office. It's a beautiful spot.
With video and audio editing and production support by Brad O'Hara and Alicia Crum. With inspiration, strategy and technical support by yours truly, Neil Hughes. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. You can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com, and remember, previous episodes are available at magicintheroom.com.